Hi guys, this is Chris Simon and this is my case study titled Internet Use Violations Threat Over the World Wide Web, where in this case study, Miss Walker, an inexperienced teacher, received a link to a threatening website, presumably created by a disgruntled student. So let's dive in. First of all, what do we know? Well, we know Miss Walker is not well liked by many of the students and their parents based on the evidence from the case. The school has a very established system that many of the parents are comfortable with already. Her coursework is considered to be overly rigorous, as evidenced by the frequent parent complaints about her class and student complaints as well. She received a direct emotional attack through her email. We also know that she also holds some resentment against some of her students, and we can tell that by her reaction towards Randy Franks, saying that she knows that he's probably the one who does it. And so you can tell that she has some resentment towards some of her students as well, and she can feel it. So what do we need to know? We need to know exactly how threatening were the curse words in the website, and were they made directly at Mrs. Walker. This information will deal directly with what types of actions need to be taken against the students if they're able to be found. We also need to know, are there students in her class that she does feel she has good standing with, which will help identify what she does well, which I think is important for the administrator to find out. He needs to find some good things that he's hearing about Miss Walker rather than just the negative things. How does she perceive her own teaching experiences so well? So with that, not just hearing what other students might have to say about her, but he needs to know what she thinks is her strengths and her weaknesses about how she's been teaching so far. What does she feel she needs to improve on when he goes through that with her, and how prepared for post-secondary state assessments or school assessments are the students that take her class after they take her class, meaning is the increased rigor in her classroom actually producing a higher level of education for the students. So after analyzing that, I had to determine what was the problem, and really I came up with two main problems from this case. The first one was that the students feel it is okay to make threatening or derogatory statements about their teachers online. The particular student that made this post or made this website had access to his teacher's email and then made the website with the intent to harm the teacher. It's not like she accidentally stumbled upon the website. It was sent directly to her as a link. So the intent was clear by the student. The student chose to do it technologically rather than in person, which implies that they intended to remain anonymous, and because they assumed that they would be anonymous, they assumed that that also allowed them to be malicious in their attack towards her, and that somehow there was a difference between saying it to her in person and just saying it from behind the safety of a computer screen. So that's the first problem. And the second problem I actually felt was the bigger problem, and it actually didn't deal directly with the technology itself, but rather with Miss Walker's reputation within the school. So I thought that Miss Walker, the biggest problem was that Miss Walker hasn't done enough to establish a good reputation within the school. And the evidence I found to support this was that it doesn't sound like she has anyone that feels confident enough in her teaching style to defend her. It detailed how the principals talked with her frequently about trying to change some of her teaching methods. It didn't mention any co-teachers that came to her defense, or any students or parents that felt like she was doing the right thing in the school. So it doesn't sound like she's had the proper meetings or sessions with parents in order to prepare them or explain her reasoning for such a rigorous coursework. I can understand how on the very first year of teaching, students wouldn't know to expect that from her, but having experienced her first year of teaching, Hopefully she would have thought to have done something to prepare her students or the parents of her students for her coursework. She hasn't had enough time in the school to establish the trust that more experienced teachers naturally get. In a school that has a very good reputation, the teachers typically have good reputations as well, which is where the school gets its reputation. And it also doesn't sound like she's been provided with enough of the right resources to be successful yet. So if that's the problem, what are we going to do about it? What is the plan of action? So I thought that we needed to take 3 steps. The first step was to move quickly to come to a swift and straightforward resolution to the digital harassment, because that is the primary concern. It's what's being dealt with right away. So you need to interview, the administrator would need to interview students that might be involved to try to find out who might have been the perpetrator of this. Utilize technology support in order to try to identify the source if the interviews don't work. You can use law enforcement agencies, if necessary, to get a cease and desist order put on the website that uses the defamatory language towards Miss Walker, because it can't be allowed to stay up. It's one of your teachers. You have to defend the reputation of your teachers and your school. So the website would have to come down. And then you need to meet with all students, not just students that might be guilty, about the proper use of internet conduct, and to reinforce the potential risks and consequences that might be involved with any misconduct. Because I think students nowadays just don't realize the consequences that can come with digital misconduct. They get behind their computer screens and think that that just protects them because they aren't doing it in person, and when really that's not the case at all, and serious actions can be taken against them and have been taken against them. And if students are at fault and are found, you need to take the appropriate disciplinary actions, such as suspensions or detention, depending on the further investigation of the materials and the seriousness of the content. Step 2 would be to work on improving Miss Walker's reputation within the school. And you do that by encouraging her to have informational sessions at the beginning of semesters with the students and parents, in which she explains her rigorous coursework, and she needs to support that rigor with evidence and basically explain why she's making the coursework so difficult, and support that with her reasons. She needs to give practical examples to the students during her actual instruction that supports her rigorous coursework. And she could use examples like, this will prepare you more for your college classes, or this is going to give you a leg up on your assessments, and maybe even student testimonials from previous years that say that because of the rigorous coursework, they were more prepared for what they had to do along as their next step. And then finally, I would want her to reflect on her rationale for having such difficult course load, and then decide if the evidence that she has to support her rigorous coursework actually is best for student learning. And so hopefully that would improve her reputation within the school. And then finally, I would provide an experienced mentor to work with Miss Walker. This would serve 3 main purposes. First would be to offer guidance on how to connect with specific students, especially if, like she mentioned, Randy, if another teacher has success with that student, getting guidance on how to deal with that student would be beneficial. Also, there's a psychological factor that comes into play when a teacher is associated with a well-liked teacher. So if Miss Walker was to be linked with a well-liked teacher within the school, then on a subconscious level, the students are going to start to change their perception about how they feel about Miss Walker, because of their natural inclinations towards that other teacher. And then finally, a colleague might be more successful at giving suggestions at how to change the way she structures her class rather than just the administrator, because sometimes because of the boss factor that comes with the administrator, people can get a little defensive about how they run their classrooms. So, does this resolve the issues based on promoting the success of all students? I felt it did because it provided guidance on responsible digital citizenship, which I think is very important for students, specifically from this generation, to understand. It allowed Miss Walker the opportunity to explain her coursework and what to expect from her class, while also allowing parents and students the opportunity to ask questions of her to kind of create a back and forth between Miss Walker and the students and parents. And then it also set up a well-respected mentor teacher to give an added layer of credibility to Miss Walker and to the school, while also providing an excellent resource to Miss Walker for her instruction. And as I went through this case, I had to reflect on what I was thinking and feeling and valuing. And overall, the first thing I was feeling was that almost all teachers change the way that they do things from their very first years of teaching. No matter how much education you come into your first years of teaching, you almost always change the way you're going to do things over time as you've had more practical experience. Also, I thought that it was very important for an administrator to support their teachers when they're talking to parents, and not to just throw their teachers under the bus, which can sometimes be the easy thing to do when you're dealing with a hostile parent. But also to take those concerns from the parent and communicate those with the teacher. And I also thought that it was, I just really valued the opportunities to provide student growth. Whenever there's a teachable moment for students, you need to seize that moment and turn what was a bad action into a learning opportunity and try to make the best out of it. And then the things that I thought required further investigation were the contents of the website would still need to be investigated to decide to what degree was the harassment, like does additional steps need to be taken from a legal standpoint against the student if necessary. How willing is Miss Walker to improve her image within the school? How willing is she to change? Because it didn't sound like she was very willing from the case study, but you would need to have that conversation with her. And does she just need time in order to become accustomed to the culture of the families and within the school? Sometimes it just takes time. So that would require some further investigation as well. Does the analysis promote the success of all students by acting with integrity, fairness, and in an ethical manner? Well, I thought it promoted the academic success of every student because it improved the perception of the class. By improving the perception of the class should improve the quality of the relationship between the teachers and the students. Guidance to the teacher from a mentor should improve the quality of the instruction. And supporting a teacher that is passionate about their content will ultimately aid in her instruction once she gains some more experience. So that would improve the overall success of the students because you'd have a highly qualified teacher. It adhered to the ethical principles and professional norms because digital citizenship should be a part of every person's ethical code. Informing all students of the dangers associated with digital misconduct helps to prevent it in the future, and supporting a staff member that was hired by the administrator is just the right thing to do as long as that teacher's working to improve themselves. And then finally, I thought it demonstrated a personal and professional code of ethics because supporting an inexperienced teacher and providing them with the resources they need to make them successful is what makes a good administrator. Educating students on respectful conduct is just the responsibility of all adults. And then getting people, both teachers and parents, to see things eye to eye and just try to see things from each other's perspective provides for a mutually beneficial solutions for the school. And so there you have it. That was my analysis of the case study. I I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed the class. Thanks.